Welcome to the Ignited Podcast, Striking Industrial Automation Conversations. We're your hosts. I'm Travis Cox.
And I'm Thomas Burke.
This episode is number 3, titled The Foundation Beneath the Foundation, OPC, OPC UA, and why it all starts here. Today, we're going to discuss inductive automation's commitment to OPC and to decode the world of OPC and OPC UA from the ground up. You know, Tom, you might know a thing or two about this subject.
I should know quite a bit, Travis, about this because I started OPC way back in 1995 when I was working for some big company out there, and it was all about interoperability. And I started this standard for a reason of, really having the first-tier visualization application be able to consume data from all these disparate devices and disparate networks. And over time, we kept evolving that standard, and we addressed a lot of different other opportunities. And in those days, I had just wrote code, and I said, the best thing to do is to make sure we can provide the best code platform that people can actually use, so it becomes a real adopted standard. And then in 2004, we were looking at different opportunities to start thinking about cross-platform and how do we get data from OT to IT, and that was the birth of OPC UA. And that was really the thing that, is I watched inductive automation, and I watched the commitment that Hay had to the OPC technology even before then, and the things you were doing. And we're going to talk about that today because, I recently joined inductive automation, and inductive automation is very committed to open standards. And I want to make sure that our audience really knows that, because the commitment that we have at open standards is OPC UA, and it's MQTT, and it's Sparkplug. But I want to make sure that everybody knows how long and the commitment that inductive has put into OPC. And then there's a lot of other standards, but I recognize, because I'm a standards guy, and success is measured by the level of adoption. And what I saw is inductive is really a leader in this. And that's why I'm so proud to be part of this company. And that's why we're going to do these podcasts today. And, I'm really very excited. I've met Kevin multiple times over the years, and I'm really excited to have Kevin on board to talk about everything he's been doing with OPC and OPC UA.
I am as well. So our guest today is Kevin Herron. He's the principal product architect here at Inductive Automation, and he is the architect behind Ignition's OPC UA server and client implementation, and the driving force behind all of the Ignition OPC drivers, making him without question the OPC guru here. We have the guru with us today. If it touches OPC, Kevin built it, right, Kevin? Welcome on.
That's right. Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Travis, I have a question for you to start this thing out. Why has OPC at the conceptual level been so important to inductive automation? I mean, you and I have talked briefly about that, and you gave me some insight. And can you share that with our audience of the commitment that inductive has to OPC and why?
Well, long story short, we are here today because of OPC. If we rewind back in 2003, when our founder, Steve, was looking for better software out there, we devised a first product, which was Factory SQL, which was a bridge between OPC servers and SQL databases. It was to get data from controllers into an open format that IT and the business and others can go and view. So it was the core of our product was OPC, and that at the time was OPC Classic. We relied on connecting to third-party OPC servers, RS Links or Kepware or Matricon, and that's we unleashed a lot of power and innovation because we were able to leverage OPC. We didn't have to, at the early days, write all the drivers to the different controllers. So it's been a fundamental part of our product from day one.
So from the beginning, you followed the model of what I so much breathed in. You literally lived and developed, the necessary technology to adopt the OPC technology core into your products. So Kevin, from your perspective, why did the foundation become important to inductive automation? Why did you guys even join the OPC Foundation?
Yeah, so that has sort of evolved as the company has grown. In the early days, membership at the foundation was about access to the spec, about access to the reference implementations, interop attendance. And as we've grown, it's become about joining the working groups and being able to shape the spec and contribute back to the spec, and to, to some degree, to watch out for our own interests, because we're invested in OPC UA. We have been since the beginning. So membership is important to us. We want to support the foundation because it supports us.
So from the first time I met you, you were always a fan of OPC. You always seemed to resonate, this commitment to open standards. And I recognize that. You might not have liked OPC Com, and we can, you and I can debate that. I didn't like OPC Com and DCOM either. And then what I recognized is that, that there were some things that we needed to do to get us cross-platform. And that's when I saw that inductive automation really started to, really jump on board and help the OPC Foundation. So what was your idea? And, how did OPC finally fill the gaps of what you thought was necessary?
Yeah, cross-platform was really the number one thing. OPC UA was like reaching version 1.0 at the exact right time as we were sort of shifting strategies and looking to go cross-platform. And then on top of that, I was attracted to it because I didn't want to write a bunch of device drivers for a bunch of old PLCs and protocols that have to be reverse engineered. Like, to me, OPC Classic and OPC UA are the obvious solution. Like, put one open interface in front of all these things and then get on with like building your product.
And I think we rewind back, so if we look at the story kind of back in 2008, 2009. 2008, we had two products here in Inductive. We had Factory SQL, which was the bidirectional bridge between OPC servers and SQL databases. And that was written in .NET, right, because of Microsoft Com. And then we had Factory PMI, which is the plant management interface. That was the visualization. And in the middle was the database. So it was the middle of the model. And Factory PMI was written in Java. And so at that time, to be cross-platform, the choice was to merge everything into a Java platform. So tell us a little about sort of how that kind of started, and because you were critical to reading the OPC UA spec and getting that implemented within the product.
Yeah, I came on right before this effort started, and essentially the first thing I worked on for inductive automation after tinkering with a few Factory PMI components was implementing OPC UA from scratch, from the spec. And we were the first people to do that as far as we're aware.
You really were. Inductive automation was the first one that recognized, in implementing a stack, and we're going to talk about that a little later on. But, when I first met you, I remember that you were coming to the OPC UA working groups, and you were coming to the, the security working group. Can you, from your perspective, I know how it works from my perspective, but from your perspective, what kind of work actually happens in these working groups, and how do you feel that you were able to contribute to the development of OPC UA? Because I saw you guys as really contributing and being a very active, contributor to the specification, and also, the security working group. So both, UA and the UA security.
The working groups are really interesting to me because once we had been working with OPC long enough, we sort of realized that OPC wasn't this thing that was happening to us. It was this thing that we could like shape and represent our interests in and like contribute to, right? Like, everybody who's contributing in a working group is coming from a different company and has a different point of view, different experiences, and they're trying to represent their interests as well as develop the best spec possible. And so I was, in the beginning, very interested in making sure that everything that went to the spec was truly cross-platform and didn't pigeonhole us into something that like couldn't be implemented in Java, for example. I was like so concerned that the spec would, evolve in a way that we wouldn't be able to keep up with. And over time, that turned out to be an unfounded concern because everybody at the foundation is quite dedicated to, complete interoperability and cross-platform, especially now that OPC UA has made its way onto embedded PCs and PLCs, and it's not just, used as a protocol conversion bridge like it was in the OPC Classic days.
I can tell you from my perspective, you were one of the first companies that, I saw the beauty of us trying to get away from COM and DCOM. I saw the need to get embedded, and Windows CE wasn't going to cut it. That wasn't the right way to go. I needed something cross-platform, but I think a lot of the people in the early OPC working groups, until you guys really came on board, were mostly the guys that knew Microsoft. They didn't recognize enough of how to go beyond Microsoft, and you guys came to the table of really realizing the importance of Java, for example. And I want to talk about that a little later on about that. And Travis, I want to get your take on this too, of what you thought, because again, OPC was committed to interoperability. But a lot of the guys that were in that working group, they didn't understand what that meant to do cross-platform. You guys really recognize that, and that again shows the power of inductive automation and how you guys really helped drive OPC. And then, Kevin, I want you to talk about that in relation to the stack you guys developed. Because I remember when you started developing this stack, I thought, this is really cool. And I know a bunch of my other guys thought, these guys are crazy. And I said, no, they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, so if you look back in 2008, 2009, we saw. All of us came from IT backgrounds, right? We came from software engineering backgrounds. We didn't, we grew up in the industry. We've understood the OT arena over the years, but that wasn't our original background. So we kind of saw that Linux was on the rise. There was a lot more happening there. In the OT world, very much Microsoft, very very heavy there. But we realized we need to be cross-platform. We need to be able to run on anything, especially because Ignition was you put on one server and it would connect everything. It would allow you to provide, collect all the data, provide visualizations to whoever wanted it. It was all web-based. It was simple. So we could be on a headless server. It could be a Linux server. It could be a Windows server. It could be VMs. And we recognized that pretty early on. And Java, it was a perfect way for us to accomplish that. And so when UA came out, it was kind of like this shining star, right? Like, oh my gosh, we can actually accomplish what we've been talking about for a while.
Bringing the IT world to OT has kind of been a thing that inductive automation has been doing since the beginning. That's like a lot of our success has been trying to bring the OT world up to speed by introducing IT concepts. And cross-platform is one of the first ones that was a big deal for us.
That kind of led to Milo, right? To the OPC UA stack. Well, there's a couple iterations of our OPC implementation with Ignition, and I don't think a lot of people kind of realize what's really behind the scenes, and some people don't even realize that they even have OPC within Ignition. But let's talk about kind of that evolution of the stack within Ignition. It started back, in 2008, 2009.
Like I said, it was like my first real project at the company was just like build an OPC server based on this new OPC UA spec. It wasn't even stamped 1.0 yet. And so we got that working over what, a year or two maybe before we finally got that first release of Ignition out. And it worked. We went to interops. We got certified at one point with that stack. But that stack didn't have the sort of separation of concerns that a properly written stack would. It wasn't split into like a stack and an SDK, and then here's the Ignition product built on top of it. It was all just sort of intertwined. And so the big problem as I saw it was that we were implementing just enough OPC UA to satisfy exactly our needs and just get certified. And I really, really wanted to do more than that. I wanted to build like a proper OPC UA SDK and make it open source, because there wasn't one. It didn't exist at the time. And I've always been a big fan of open source. Like Ignition is built, I don't know if you realize it or not as a user, but it's built on 10, 20, 50, 100 open source libraries. Like its foundation is open source, just like almost every product in the IT world. And so I like to acknowledge that and try to give back by also doing open source software.
When you guys did that, that was when I recognized this is cool. And I wanted to open source all the OPC technology. And actually I did. I went to the board of directors and said, I'm going to open source everything. I'm making the specs available for free. I'm going to make certification available to everybody. And it was all based on your company. And now that I'm part of this company, I really see the power of this now. And, I think this is really important. And, this whole thing of the open platform and, interoperability and cross-platform, I think is really enabled. And I think that's really what I want to highlight about, inductive automation has always been committed to open standards, specifically OPC. And you guys, you really went overboard because you implemented, the stack from the specification. And that was in all in Java. So that's exciting things for us. So, what does the ongoing work that you want to do with Milo, look like today?
I want to go back to one thing you just said, which is about how you pushed to open source the specs and everything. Because I said in the beginning that one of the reasons we joined was about access to the specification. And I want to acknowledge that that's no longer necessary today. Like, the spec is available online. The reference implementations are on GitHub. Like, OPC was already open, and it's even more open than it was 15 years ago now. And, I think sometimes people levy undue criticism on OPC for being a closed process, but it's actually not. Anybody can get to the spec, anybody can get to the implementations, anybody can join these working groups. It's all there and available for you.
I really want to, continue to get the message out of how OPC UA is so embedded and deeply integrated into Ignition. So, what architectural decisions do you make, knowing that you personally are committed to open standards? And, how does this benefit the system integrators and the end users in their day-to-day stuff with the fact that we have embedded, open standards into Ignition?
Yeah. OPC UA is so embedded into Ignition that most people don't even realize they're using it. Like, at this point, we have a fairly large collection of drivers for all the common PLCs and protocols that people in North America and to some degree Europe are using. And what people don't realize until they are quite a bit more familiar with Ignition than a new user would be is that all of these drivers are actually plugins to our OPC UA server. And out of the box, Ignition just simply has a loopback connection defined to that server. And that server receives no special treatment. It is exactly the same as any connection to any other OPC UA server out there. And so in that way, we ensure that every OPC UA player is treated the same way. There's no special treatment, right? So you can bring any other OPC UA server you want in. You can bring in your Kepware. You can bring in your direct connections to PLCs. It's all the same to us, and it all works just as well as the loopback connection does.
So as I've looked at the portfolio of all the different devices and networks that are in the industry across a lot of different vertical industries, Ignition has connectivity to virtually everything. In comparison to companies that want to be competitors of Ignition, you guys have the massive set of connectivity, and it's because of you're the native drivers, and it's the native drivers, it's OPC, it's MQTT, and it's Sparkplug. And I'm going to talk later on about our relationships with with Cirrus Link and why Sparkplug is important, and it's all about this, right? And so I guess what's the future? What do you think inductive automation's role inside of the OPC ecosystem could be, or where do you want to help OPC drive? I'm putting you on the spot.
I would say we are sort of leading OPC UA in North America and following a bit in Europe. And what I really want to see is for us to become leaders in both. And what that means for Ignition is just embracing more parts of what OPC UA makes available. Things like, first-class alarms and condition support, exporting our history through OPC UA historical access, consuming historical data through OPC UA historical access, maybe some data modeling, part 5 companion spec type things in our server. We're seeing a lot of demand from the market for this now, and we're committed.
Yeah, we've kind of started some of these efforts in that, like with the part 5, that companion spec, luckily that's an independent spec that is about being able to do data modeling and serialize that to a node set, as an XML document. And if those exist out there in the libraries, there's some cloud libraries that OPC has that we have a converter that can import that, and create the UDTs in Ignition. But what you're talking about is going further, where it's automatically discovered through OPC and being able to just be a native part. So it's real fast and real simple, because this is the way where the industry is going, right? It is creating these data models, standardizing on these models across the enterprise, so that they can actually get to digital transformation, AI, and all the initiatives that we want to do. But it fundamentally means we have to define the right data at the edge in order for this to happen.
And there are a lot of other standards that are out there. We talked about, I talk about part 5 of the OPC UA architecture, which is all about the information modeling and all these companion specs. But what I recognize is Inductive really is committed to doing these things. And that's why I'm so excited about being part of Inductive, because, we've been talking about COPA and OPAS, and we should talk a little bit about that, because, it's been active that Inductive Automation has actually been very involved in that. We're active with SESME, and SESME is a very important part in the U.S. right now, and eventually maybe it'll be resignated into Europe, but we're very committed to that, and we're going to talk about the i3X at some point in time, and so how do you keep up with all this stuff, Kevin? I mean, there's so many of open standards that how do you keep from being totally overwhelmed?
To be honest, I am a little overwhelmed, but I try my best to stay on top of them. I read them. I mean, you mentioned i3X. I started attending some other working group meetings in the beginning to just really get an idea of what it was actually about, and not sort of the LinkedIn story where, I don't know, you have to really dig into a spec to understand what it's actually about and separate the marketing from the technical. And so I write less code these days and I read more documents is the reality.
Yeah, and I know, you mentioned, COPA and OPA. Like when OPA started, number of years ago, we were members. We were in the, part of that standard, and have really just been sitting there as a listener, kind of waiting for that first version to get ready. And we're kind of at that cusp now, right? POCs are starting to happen, largely based on OPC UA. There's a lot of efforts. A lot of the future what we're doing in the product is aligned so that we, and working with COPA, the Coalition for OPA, that we can actually realize these these vendor agnostic DCS systems, and it's pretty exciting to kind of see that. And I know that you've gone out and you've worked with COPA, you've talked about these, and you're kind of looking at how this can shape an Ignition. Yeah,
we're super excited about the future that COPA unlocks for the DCS world, right? They've never had truly vendor agnostic interoperability before. They're locked in top to bottom for 30 years with one vendor.
Right.
And COPA's coming along to try and change that.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of, I think, converging things that are happening, right? Which is cool. A lot of things that are, these different efforts. So you're talking about SESME and then COPA and with the DCS, but it's all this is around the fact that we're trying to get to open standards. Open standards unlocks innovation. And that's something that you have, from the very beginning, really understood and believe in, especially with OPC. But I do want to go back real quick to Milo in particular. I don't think we've fully talked about what Milo is and kind of what you've done there, because that's now part of the Eclipse Foundation. So can you give us an overview of Milo, sort of what stemmed that, and now that's a part of Ignition. So give us that whole story.
Yeah, Milo was my ground up, fresh start implementation of doing an OPC UA stack and SDK, what I thought was the right way, right? Separate from Ignition, fresh start. There was no Java stack available, or no Java SDK available at the time. And so I came back from an interop one year where I had built something of a prototype SDK on top of the OPC Foundation did used to have a very minimal Java example stack. And I had tried to build an SDK on top of that. And I took it to an interop and I tested my little demo server there. And I spent the whole interop basically debugging issues in that stack because it had essentially been abandoned at that point. The OPC Foundation wasn't maintaining that. An external company was. I don't think I can name them, I guess, but
It's okay.
some other company was maintaining it, but not doing a very good job because it was a conflict of interest for them because they were also building an SDK and they didn't really want to be doing that for free. So Friday afternoon after the interop, while I was waiting for my flight, that's when what became Milo was born. I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to write a proper stack all the way from the ground up. Code generators, everything. And that was 10 years ago, right?
Wow.
And it evolved. It became kind of, it was like a skunkworks project at first. I didn't ask anybody's permission to do this. I just sort of built it and then I put it on GitHub. And then the Eclipse Foundation eventually found it and they're like, hey, you should make this part of our IoT umbrella. And so I did. And at that point, I kind of had to go legit because to be part of the Eclipse Foundation, you have to have a contributor agreement signed because they have a really strict due diligence process for good reason, right? Yeah. If you're using a project that is Eclipse licensed, you know it's safe to use. And so I had to come back to IA and I had to go to Carl and get Carl's signature for the contributor license agreement. And after that, we started integrating Milo into Ignition itself. First, it replaced the in-house OPC implementation for the client connections we make. And then in the next major release, it replaced the server. It's been a huge success so far. And then on top of that, all of Milo is open source and it has a ton of other companies who are using this.
That's the beauty of the open source community by having out there. So Ignition uses that. It's an open standard. You built, the open source implementation. It's out there on GitHub. Other people can use it. We use it, and together we're making. We can push it. We can push it forward, and we can have more innovation. Than if it was just purely only in Ignition.
This is one of the wonderful things that inductive automation, you personally, your commitment of what you did. I mean, you talk about committing to open standards and committing to OPC by developing this and then open sourcing it and, with the Eclipse Foundation. And I'm sure you're still doing a lot of work helping maintain this thing because, OPC is never going to be a done standard. It's going to continue to evolve and address, new things. So you're actively still maintaining this, you personally, as well as a lot of other people, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's kind of my baby.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
I think I'll always, whatever I'm doing here at work, whether it stays on OPC UA or I temporarily move away to something else, I'll always be maintaining Milo. So I do a lot of maintenance on it. We're, currently meeting the OPC UA 1.05 requirements. We were previously 1.03 and, with the 1.0 release of Milo, we jumped up to 105. And, now it's extra feature type things. We're working on, ECC support for the security profiles. PubSub maybe. It's kind of started, so.
All the stuff that's happened and where there's a lot of different places Ignition's going to be going. What are you most excited about in this world? Of the various things with OPC, what are you most excited about?
Right now, we're bringing OPC UA connection redundancy into the 2027 version. I'm very excited about that because it ties back into this COPA stuff, which it's a requirement for some of these COPA systems, and it's something that I think a lot of people have been asking for. I'm super excited about bringing OPC UA events and alarms and conditions into Ignition. I'm excited about the history stuff. It's all really exciting to me.
Yeah, and there's been no shortage of customers wanting these things, right? They ask you on the forum, or if they have to go on speed dial. They've been banging the door down for a while to get some of these features, and then and everything's kind of coming together so we can do it.
We got into kind of a development rut where like 8.3 took us longer than we wanted to. I don't think that's really a secret, right? It took us longer to get that release out than we wanted. And so we have all these exciting features that were backlogged while we had to get 8.3 done that we're now finally able to start working on and get out to the world.
I think it's just wonderful. And I saw Inductive Automation's commitment to OPC a long time ago. And this keeps talking about, what you have committed to and what Inductive Automation has been doing. And I think that's so important. I was in OPC for a long time. I lived and breathed it. And, I watched different companies, and it's exciting to watch the commitment that Inductive Automation has had to open standards. And I know we're going to support AC and HA, and, we've already exceeded the expectations of many of the end users' needs for OPC UA. And, I always talk about success is measured by the level of adoption. And what's happened is Inductive Automation is adopting all these open standards, the ones that make most sense. And, we will work with open, we will adopt them, and we're already way ahead of, what they wanted as requirements. And, it's a very powerful thing. So it's just a pleasure to have you on board with us. And, it's a pleasure for me to be here at Inductive Automation because you've really shared an amazing story about what you've done and what Inductive Automation has done. And I all I can say is thank you for everything you've done, and the work you've done. When I first met you, I'm like, this guy's crazy. I thought that, no offense, but you had a vision. You had a vision, and Inductive Automation had a commitment to, the Java stack, and now with what we've done with Milo into the Eclipse Foundation, I guess from here, we're going to close this out, and we're going to do another one with you because you got a lot more to tell. I know that. I guess the message I want to give here is this is exciting. I want everybody to know how committed Inductive Automation really is to open standards, specifically OPC and OPC UA. I encourage you to download a free trial of Ignition and connect up to your favorite OPC UA device or server on your own network and really see what the power of Ignition offers, to everyone. And specifically, like I said earlier, Ignition connects to everything. And I'm just amazed at the portfolio of devices and networks we're able to talk to. For our next episode, Beyond Here, and we're going to bring Kevin back again at another point in time, but we're going to explore beyond OPC. I want to talk about MQTT. I want to talk about Sparkplug and the whole revolution of the edge. And I'm going to bring in a guy named Benson Howland, who was one of the founders of OPC with me way back when, and Arlen Nipper, who's the MQTT expert. And so we're excited about this, and I'd like to jump up and down, but, I'll knock the table over. But, I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts so you don't miss any episodes. And I want to thank Travis and Kevin for the great discussion we just had on what Inductive Automation has done over the years with OPC and OPC UA and our real commitment to open standards. And I'm proud to be part of this company.